From 2008 to 2019, the multi-level marketing industry in the US experienced a 20% increase in retail sales. So far, it seems that 2020 is likely to be another profitable year for MLM companies, especially as MLM reps continue to capitalize on the pandemic by enticing the newly unemployed with their bogus work-from-home opportunities. Basically, business seems to be booming for MLMs, despite the media trend of exposing MLMs as scammy and cult-like. People are still joining. According to the AARP Foundation, 1 in 13 Americans have been involved with an MLM company at some point in their lives. So, statistically speaking, if you haven't been involved with an MLM yourself, it's pretty likely that at some point in your life, someone you're close to, someone you love, will become trapped in one of these schemes. Anyone who's already experienced a loved one's involvement with a high-demand group like an MLM knows that trying to get their loved one out is a difficult task. Cults have mastered the art of controlling their followers' thoughts and actions, and once someone is entrenched in the cult mindset, it can be a difficult spell to break. But luckily, there's hope. I have developed the following 3-step guide to hopefully help those who are dealing with a family member, close friend, or a loved one who has joined an MLM. I based much of my 3-step guide off of the work of cult psychologist Steve Hassan. Hassan himself was a member of a religious cult called the Moonies back in the late 70s. After he was successfully deprogrammed from the cult by his family, Hassan dedicated his life to researching cults and helping others escape cult mind control. He has developed a non-coercive approach that is centered on empowering members to break away from the cult identity and think freely. It's really about giving individuals the power to make their own decisions. I have based my guide on his non-coercive approach, but as a disclaimer, I'm not a psychologist, and I don't have any degrees in psychology. I'm a lifelong learner though, and I have learned a lot from the work of Hassan and others like him. And I'm attempting to incorporate what I have learned into my anti-MLM activism. This guide should be taken as informational only. Please don't take it as gospel. Also, I'm not guaranteeing that if you go through these steps with your loved one, that they will end up leaving their MLM. This guide is simply my ideas on how to best approach a loved one that's stuck in an MLM. Now that we have my disclaimer out of the way, let's go ahead and discuss the first step. Step 1, building trust and rapport. When someone joins an MLM, one of the first things they're told is that their friends and family will most likely be critical of their decision to join. They're then told that those critical of MLMs are ignorant, jealous, or even hateful, and that they should cut ties with the critics in their life as to not allow their bad energy to bring them and their business down. So there are multiple things going on here. First of all, the MLM is purposely isolating their members from hearing any arguments against their business model. They're trapping members in the MLM bubble where they're constantly fed the MLM's narrative, and any critics are kept outside this almost impenetrable bubble. Secondly, the MLM is creating an us versus them mentality. The us have been told that by joining an MLM, they have received some secret knowledge or power, and the them, or those who turn down the MLM offer or are outwardly critical of it, are too weak, ignorant, or jaded to access this secret knowledge or power. This mentality leads to the formation of outsider versus insider groups. Thirdly, MLMs are teaching their members to expect ridicule and persecution. In fact, since the anti-MLM movement has grown significantly over the last few years, MLMs have caught on to the common arguments used by anti-MLMers. They are now teaching their members these arguments, but in a way that misrepresents the argument itself and discredits the argument presenter. This is called poisoning the well. An example of this would be an MLM teaching their members that anti-MLMers will accuse them of being in a cult. They will say the truth is that anti-MLMers are the ones actually in a cult because they have bought into the cult of corporate America. This is why I highly discourage people from accusing MLMers of being in a cult. Yes, in my opinion, MLMs do meet the criteria of a destructive cult, but this accusation directed towards a specific MLMer will only trigger the phobia and mistrust of critics that the MLM has instilled in them through techniques like poisoning the well. Instead, we need to focus on building up trust and rapport with our loved one who has joined an MLM. Our immediate reaction should not be one that's confrontational, where we accuse them of being in a cult and then throw out a bunch of facts and figures in an attempt to get them to leave. Remember, the MLM is already working to distance them from their friends and family who don't show overwhelming approval of their MLM involvement. So if you go into it trying to win an argument, you're only going to push them further away from you. Our goal here is to keep a line between them and the world outside of the MLM. It sounds cheesy, but the key here is love. Reassure them that you love them unconditionally, and that your love isn't predicated on whether or not they leave their MLM. You want them to feel as though you're someone they can talk to without fear of ridicule or condemnation. When you're with them, try and connect on things that bring you both together. For many distributors, their MLM becomes their identity because these companies sell their opportunity as an entire lifestyle. They may begin talking incessantly about their MLM and products, so try and redirect the conversation to something you both have in common or something that you enjoy about them as a person. Talking with them about memories you both share together from before they joined is a great way to do this. You want to remind them of who they were before they joined their MLM. You want to disempower the cult identity and empower them to believe they're capable of thinking and acting independently from the pressures they're probably facing from their MLM. Step 2, ask them questions. So in the first step, we really took a mild approach where we emphasized love, compassion, and understanding. These are important things to lead with, but if we stop at this step, our loved one could misconstrue this as approval for their MLM involvement. We don't want that. It's definitely okay for us to take a firm stance against MLMs, and one of the ways we can do this is by refusing to buy MLM products from them. When someone first joins an MLM, their family and close friends will be their easiest to access customer base. They will most likely proposition you to buy products from them. As an anti-MLM activist, I highly discourage people from buying MLM products because not only by purchasing are you floating money to a company that has a record of victimizing and oppressing women and minorities, you're also potentially giving your loved one unwarranted hope that their MLM business will work out. Even just one sale might be enough to give someone hope and keep them involved longer than they should be. I suggest saying something along the lines of, "Thank you for thinking of me, but I don't support MLMs," or "I'll have to pass because I have concerns about the MLM business model." Another way to get across our anti-MLM stance is by asking them questions. Our goal here is to not actually make any statements about what we think about MLMs, but simply ask them questions that will encourage critical thinking and maybe sow some seeds of doubt. This is basically the Socratic method. People almost always join MLMs for emotional reasons, not rational ones. So by asking questions, you're encouraging them to think more deeply about their decision to join. You're also potentially presenting them with information they hadn't previously considered because MLMs emphasize to their members the rare success stories rather than the disappointing reality. Some questions you might consider asking are, have you seen your company's income disclosure statement, or do they produce one at all? Do you know across the industry what the average success rate is for a distributor? Do you know what the history of the founder is? How much does your upline make, or have they told you how much they make? Do you know how the FTC distinguishes between MLMs and unlawful pyramid schemes? Ideally, you should know the answers to the questions you ask, but your goal isn't to tell them what the answers are, but to hopefully inspire them to research into these things on their own. People are more likely to change their mind if they arrive at conclusions on their own, rather than being told what the conclusions they should arrive at. This is also why it's important to avoid asking questions that are loaded or contain underlying assumptions. Another line of questioning we want to engage in is figuring out what motivated them to join in the first place. I found that more often than not, someone joins an MLM because they have underlying needs that aren't being met. For example, many women join MLMs because they're lacking an adequate support system or lacking friendships with other women. Some join because they're in desperate need for extra cash. Others join because they have a drive to start a small business but need a flexible schedule. And surprise, surprise, MLMs promise to deliver on all these things but fail to actually do so in most cases. By simply saying to your loved one, "Hey, I want to hear more about why you decided to join X, Y, and Z MLM," you'll potentially be able to identify what the underlying need is for them. If you know what their underlying need is, you might be able to brainstorm with them on ways they could meet these needs outside of the MLM. For example, if your loved one wants more of a support system from other stay-at-home moms and thinks their MLM is a good way to find this, you might be able to help them arrange weekly get-togethers with other stay-at-home moms that live in their neighborhood or go to their church. Another reason to discover what their underlying needs are is that so later you can hold them accountable when the MLM inevitably fails to deliver. If your friend tells you that they joined because they desperately need an extra $300 a month, make sure to ask them every couple of months how they're doing with this goal. Make sure to be specific about what their goal was, and don't allow them to shift their goal to make the situation seem better than it is. You're trying to remind them of why they initially joined and hopefully get them to see that their MLM business isn't helping them reach that goal. Step 3, ask them to keep a spreadsheet of income versus expenses. I know this guide has been long-winded so far, but I'm going to keep the last step short and sweet. Many people that join MLMs think that all they'll need to invest is a couple $100s for the starter kit, but that's actually rarely the case. Most MLMers end up spending hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on training materials, product inventory, tickets to their MLM conferences, and other miscellaneous items. They almost always end up spending more money than they can make, so it's a good idea to suggest that they keep a spreadsheet of their income versus expenses. You can frame it to them as you're just trying to help them keep good business records, but really, you want them to have a visual representation of how much the MLM is costing them. Of course, I'm obligated to say that they may end up being that rare 0.4% that does make money, but more likely than not, they'll end up being that 99.6% of people that don't. If they don't keep track of how much they're spending versus how much they're making, it will be easier for them to live in a state of ignorance and ignore the fact that they're not making any profit. But if you help them keep good records, it'll be much harder for them to deny the evidence when it's right there on a computer screen staring them in the face. I hope it's kind of obvious already, but this 3-step guide is not a quick fix. It's not something that you can use on a person and then a week later they'll end up leaving their MLM, although that would be really cool though. It's something that does require a substantial amount of effort on your part and a whole lot of patience. The primary goal here is to keep your loved one connected to the outside world. MLMs purposely try to keep their members in echo chambers, where they're only hearing the rhetoric propagated by the MLM, and after a while, they become indoctrinated. You need to be their lifeline to the world outside and keep them grounded to reality. Steve Hassan was involved with the Moonies for over 2 years and was only convinced to leave after experiencing a near-fatal car accident. After he was rushed to the hospital, the only person he felt comfortable enough to call and let know he had been in an accident was his sister. He said he called his sister because she was the only family member who had not accused him of being in a cult. Instead, while still disagreeing with his involvement with the group, she continued to show him love and support. His sister got him back in contact with the rest of his family, and the time he spent recovering with his family allowed him to clear the fog of influence the cult had on him and view it more objectively. We want to slowly and consistently cut through the fog that MLMs cast over those they suck into their schemes. If anyone happens to try these techniques I mentioned in my video, I would be really interested to hear how it went. You could email me at theantibotyt@gmail.com. Also, if anyone has successfully persuaded a loved one to leave an MLM or prevented them from joining in the first place, using techniques that I didn't mention, please feel free to leave a comment. I would love to hear your thoughts and ideas on this as well. As always, if you like this video, please make sure to subscribe, ring the bell, join my Patreon, follow me on Twitter at TheAntibot, and I'll see you on the next one. Say bye! Or just yawn. You can do that too.